I opened my treasure chest, and my entire life was gone. Not misplaced, not rearranged, gone. The cedar scent still lingered, warm and familiar, but it felt wrong now, like walking into a room that still smelled like someone who had already left forever. The velvet lining was untouched. Empty. I froze right there, bent over like an old woman searching for something she knew she wouldn't find. My fingers hovered over the hollow space where my sapphire pendant used to rest. Gone. Every ring. Every bracelet. Every piece my husband ever placed in my hands with a quiet smile. Gone. For a second, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. So I checked again. And again. Nothing changed. Have you ever trusted someone so completely, you never thought to question them? That was me. That chest had been sitting at the foot of my bed for 30 years, never locked, never hidden. Because I believed I was safe. Safe in my home. Safe with my family. I wasn't careless. I was certain. And that's what made it worse. Because this wasn't just about jewelry. This wasn't about gold or stones or how much they could be sold for. This was my life. Each piece had a memory attached to it, a moment, a reason, a story. And someone had taken all of it, like it meant nothing. Like I meant nothing. I lowered myself a little further, my knees complaining as I leaned into the chest again, hopping, just hopping, that maybe I missed something. I didn't. All I found were empty silk pouches, shoved into the corner like scraps. That's when the cold feeling settled in. Not panic. Not confusion. Clarity. This wasn't random. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. They knew where everything was. They knew what it meant. And more importantly, they knew I wouldn't expect it. My grip tightened on the edge of the chest. Because in that moment, I wasn't wondering who did it anymore. I already knew. Right on cue, I heard it. A voice. Soft, carefree, almost cheerful. Drifting in from the kitchen, like nothing in the world had changed. Like nothing had just been stolen. Like I hadn't just lost 40 years of my life in a single afternoon. I slowly pushed myself upright, leaning on my cane. My heart wasn't racing. It was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes when the truth is already sitting in front of you, waiting for you to accept it. I took a step toward the door. Then another. Each one steady. Each one certain. Because I recognized that voice. If someone could walk into your home and erase your entire life in one afternoon, wouldn't you want to see how it ends before it happens to you? Subscribe now, because the next story might not give you a warning. And if you still won't subscribe, tell me why in the comments. I paused at the doorway. For a brief moment, I considered turning back, closing the lid, pretending I hadn't seen anything. But some truths don't stay buried just because you look away. I tightened my grip on my cane and stepped forward. Because there was only one person in this house bold enough to do something like this, and still hum to herself afterward. And I wasn't afraid of confronting her. I was afraid of being right. And the worst part, I already knew who took them. Before those pieces ever touched that chest, they came from a man who understood me better than I understood myself. My husband, Silas. Now, Silas wasn't the kind of man who chased attention. He didn't believe in loud displays or flashy gifts meant to impress strangers. He believed in meaning. He used to say, "If I'm giving you something, it better have a story. Otherwise, it's just metal." And he meant that. We weren't rich, not even close. We built everything slowly, paycheck by paycheck, year by year. Some months were tight. Some years felt heavier than others. But Silas never missed a moment that mattered. Not once. He had this quiet way of watching life as it happened, and turning those moments into something you could hold. Not to show off, but to remember. That's what those pieces were. Not jewelry. Proof that we lived, that we struggled, that we stayed. The first piece he ever gave me wasn't expensive. Most people would have walked right past it. A small Art Deco brooch he found at an estate sale the same week we signed papers for our first home. Back then, we barely had enough for furniture. The house echoed when you spoke. I remember asking him, "Silas, why would you buy this now of all times?" He smiled that quiet smile of his and said, "Because this is the moment we'll want to remember when everything gets better." And he was right. That brooch sat in that chest for decades, but every time I held it, I didn't see metal. I saw peeling wallpaper, empty rooms, and two young people who had no idea what they were doing, but chose to stay anyway. That's what it meant. Now tell me, how do you put a price on that? Because someone did. Someone looked at that memory and decided it was worth cash. Then there was the sapphire pendant. That one was different. Silas gave it to me after our honeymoon. We couldn't afford anything fancy, so we drove ourselves down to the Atlantic coast instead. Just a small rental, nothing special. But the ocean. I had never seen anything like it. I stood there for what felt like hours, just watching the waves, completely lost in it. Silas didn't say much. He just stood beside me. A week later, when we got back home, he handed me that pendant. Deep blue, almost alive when the light hit it. "So you don't forget what peace looks like," he told me. I wore that piece on every anniversary after that. Not because it matched my outfit. Because it reminded me that even when life got loud, there were moments where everything felt still. And now, gone. Sold like it was nothing more than decoration. Not every piece came from happy times. Some came from years we barely made it through. There was a gold bracelet he gave me after we paid off a mountain of debt that nearly broke us. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, both of us exhausted, staring at that final statement like it didn't feel real. He didn't celebrate loudly. He just reached into his pocket and placed that bracelet in my hand. "We made it," he said. That was it. No speech, no show. Just truth. Then there was the ring he gave me after our son Julian was born. I was tired, overwhelmed, unsure of everything. Silas didn't try to fix it. He just reminded me that I wasn't alone in it. Each piece marked something we survived. Not moments we bought. Moments we earned. That chest wasn't filled with valuables. It was filled with time. 40 years of it. Every struggle, every quiet victory, every moment that could have broken us, but didn't. People look at jewelry and see price tags. I looked at mine and saw my entire life laid out piece by piece. So when I say someone didn't just steal from me, understand what I mean. They didn't take objects. They took the physical proof that my life mattered. They took the reminders of a man who loved me in ways most people don't even recognize anymore. And they treated it like something disposable, like something replaceable. Let me ask you something. What would you do if someone took your memories and sold them like they were nothing more than items on a shelf? Not strangers. Not outsiders. Someone sitting at your table. Someone you fed. Someone who looked you in the eye every day and smiled like they belonged there. Because that's what this was. Not random. Not careless. Intentional. Those weren't just stolen items, they were chosen targets. Vanessa didn't walk into my life like a storm. She arrived like a gift. Polite, smiling, well-dressed in a way that made people turn their heads without quite knowing why. The kind of woman who knew exactly how to position herself in a room so all eyes found her eventually. The first time Julian brought her home, she hugged me before I could even offer a handshake. "Mrs. Beatrice, I've heard so much about you," she said, voice soft, eyes bright. I remember thinking, how lovely. She complimented the house, admired the antique furniture, even asked about the cedar chest sitting at the foot of my bed when she caught a glimpse of it through the open door. At the time, it felt like curiosity. Now I know better. Vanessa didn't admire things. She assessed them. Every smile had a purpose. Every question led somewhere. Back then, I thought she was trying to fit into the family. I didn't realize she was studying it. It didn't take long to notice what mattered most to her. Appearance. Not just looking nice, that's normal. Vanessa treated it like a full-time responsibility. Her mornings didn't begin with breakfast or conversation. They began with a mirror. Lights on, phone in hand, camera angled just right. I would pass by her room and hear her recording short videos, adjusting her voice, practicing expressions, reviewing herself with a level of focus I had only seen in people preparing for court. Except she wasn't building a case. She was building an image. Hours would go by with her scrolling through clinics, comparing procedures, watching other women transform themselves into versions that looked almost identical by the end. She'd touch the corners of her eyes, her jawline, her cheeks, always searching for something to correct. New year, new me, she would say, but she said it every month. At first, I told myself it was harmless. People have their interests. But there was something unsettling about the way she looked at herself. Like she was never satisfied. Like she was chasing a version of herself that didn't exist yet. And worse, she believed it was just one more change away. Vanessa never raised her voice at me. That would have been easier to confront. Instead, she worked in small, quiet ways. The kind that make you question yourself before you question them. She didn't like my antiques. Called them clutter with a polite smile, as if she were doing me a favor by pointing it out. She didn't like the smell of my baking. Opened windows without asking, claiming she needed fresh air. And slowly, piece by piece, she began shifting things in the house. A chair moved here. A cabinet reorganized there. Items I had placed carefully over decades suddenly relocated for better flow. Always with a reason. Always with that same calm tone. Just trying to help Nana. That word, help, did a lot of heavy lifting for her. Because it made everything sound harmless. Even when it was. My son Julian was a good man. Still is. But goodness doesn't always come with strength. And Vanessa knew that. She never argued with him directly. She didn't need to. She had a way of guiding conversations, nudging decisions, planting ideas that sounded like they came from him. Don't you think your mom would be more comfortable somewhere smaller? Wouldn't it be easier if the house didn't have so much stuff? Always framed as concern. Always delivered gently. And Julian, he listened. Not because he agreed right away, but because he didn't want conflict. I could see it happening in real time. Him choosing peace over truth. Him convincing himself that maybe she had a point. That maybe I was getting older. That maybe things did need to change. He wasn't against me, but he wasn't standing up for me either. And that space in between. That's where Vanessa did her best work. When Vanessa moved in after my hip surgery, the house stopped feeling like mine. She called it temporary. Said she just wanted to help while I recovered. But temporary has a way of stretching when no one pushes back. Rooms started changing. My routines started adjusting around hers. Even the way things sounded felt different. Less warmth. More tension. Not loud, just present. Like something was always slightly off. I tried to stay kind. I offered tea. She offered brochures. Assisted living communities, she called them. Places with bright walls and quiet hallways where people waited to be checked on instead of lived with. I just want you to be comfortable, she'd say. But comfort wasn't what she was offering. She was offering distance. Let me ask you something. Is she selfish or just desperate? Because there's a difference. One takes without care. The other convinces themselves they deserve to take. Vanessa didn't act like a villain. She acted like someone improving her situation. And that's what made her dangerous. Because people like that don't see what they're doing as wrong. They see it as necessary. Then money got tight. Julian lost his firm's partnership. The steady income that kept everything running slowed. And suddenly, those appointments Vanessa spent hours planning started getting canceled. The tone in the house shifted again. Less patience. Less pretending. More urgency. And that's when everything changed. I didn't rush. That might surprise you. Most people would have stormed down those stairs, shouting, demanding answers before their thoughts could even catch up. Not me. I took my time. Each step was slow, deliberate, steady against the hardwood beneath my feet. My cane tapped lightly with every movement, echoing through the house in a rhythm that felt louder than it should have. Because everything else was too quiet. Too normal. That's what made it unsettling. The scent of something fresh drifted from the kitchen, fruit, maybe, something blended, something healthy, something that didn't belong in a moment like this. And over it, that sound again. Humming. Light, carefree. Like nothing had happened. Like nothing had been taken. I paused just before the doorway, my hand tightening slightly around the handle of my cane. There's a moment before confrontation, where everything becomes very clear. No confusion. No second guessing. Just truth waiting on the other side. I stepped in. Vanessa stood at the counter, her back to me, blending something green into a glass. She didn't turn around right away. She heard me. I know she did. But she took her time, finished pouring, adjusted the glass, set it down carefully like she was performing for an audience that wasn't there. Only then did she glance over her shoulder. "Oh," she said lightly, "you're up." No concern. No hesitation. Just that same tone she always used when she thought she was in control. I stepped further into the room. "Vanessa," I said, keeping my voice steady, "where is my jewelry?" She blinked once, then turned fully, leaning back against the counter as if I'd asked her something trivial. "Your jewelry," she repeated. "Yes." There was a pause. Not long. Just long enough for her to decide how she wanted to play it. And then, she smiled. "Oh, Nana," she said, picking up her glass like we were having a casual conversation. "You mean those old pieces in that chest?" Old pieces. That's what she called them. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She took a slow sip, watching me over the rim of the glass. "I handled it," she continued. "You should thank me, actually." Thank her. For a moment, I thought I misheard her. "I sold them," she added, as if clarifying something helpful. "To a private broker, very professional. We got a decent amount considering." Considering. My fingers tightened around my cane. "You sold them," I repeated. "Yes," she said simply. "Julian's been under a lot of pressure lately, and honestly, those things were just sitting there. It didn't make sense." Didn't make sense. "That jewelry was part of my life," I said. She shrugged. "And now it's helping ours." I stared at her. Not because I didn't understand what she was saying. Because I did. Perfectly. "You had no right," I said quietly. She tilted her head slightly, like she was humoring me. Be realistic," she replied. "You haven't worn any of it in years." "That doesn't matter." "It does," she said, her tone sharpening just a little. "You're not going anywhere, Beatrice." There it was. Not Nana. Not even a soft version of it. Beatrice. Cold, direct, distant. "You're 80, she continued. "What exactly were you saving it for?" I felt something shift in my chest. Not anger. Something deeper. Something steadier. "They weren't for saving," I said. "They were for remembering." She let out a small laugh. "Well, now you don't have to worry about that anymore. Let me ask you something. If this happened to your mother, would you stay silent? Would you stand there, while someone erased her life piece by piece and called it practical. Because that's what this was. Not a misunderstanding. Not a mistake. A decision. "You stole from me," I said. Vanessa shook her head immediately. "No," she corrected. "I made a decision for this family." "This family," I repeated. "Yes," she said firmly. "Someone has to think ahead." Ahead. That word again. Always looking forward. Never looking back. Never understanding what had already been built. "You took something that wasn't yours," I said. She stepped closer now, her expression tightening, patience wearing thin. "I didn't think you'd need them," she replied. There it was. Clear, simple, final. I held her gaze. "And you decided that for me?" "Yes." No hesitation. No regret. Just certainty. She reached out suddenly and patted my cheek. Soft. Dismissive. Like I was something fragile. Something already fatting. That's when she made her biggest mistake. She touched my face. After she touched my face, I didn't react. Not the way she expected. No raised voice. No trembling hands. No scene. I simply looked at her. Long enough for her confidence to settle back into place. Because that's what she was waiting for. A reaction she could dismiss. An outburst she could later describe as proof that I was losing control. But I didn't give her that. I turned. Slowly. And walked out of the kitchen without another word. Behind me, I could hear her scoff lightly, the sound of someone who believed the conversation was over. She was wrong. That wasn't the end. That was the moment I stopped reacting and started thinking. Because something about her confidence didn't sit right. People who steal usually try to hide it. They deny, they deflect, they hesitate. Vanessa. She stood there and explained it like she had every right. Like she was protected. And that meant one thing. There was more. I sat in my room for a long time after that. Not crying. Not packing. Just sitting. Replaying every word she said. Every tone, every pause, every choice. "I didn't think you'd need them." That wasn't just arrogance. That was assumption. Final. Confident. As if she had already placed me somewhere in her mind. Somewhere that made decisions like that acceptable. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about money alone. Money doesn't give someone that level of certainty. Money doesn't make someone feel untouchable. There had to be something else. Something bigger. Something that made her believe she could take from me and face no consequences. My eyes drifted toward the hallway. Toward the room she called her office. That's where she spent most of her time lately. Door closed. Voice low. Always typing. Always planning. At the time, I ignored it. That was my mistake. The next morning, I waited. I didn't follow her. I didn't ask questions. I watched. And when her car finally pulled out of the driveway, I moved. Not fast, but faster than she would have expected from someone she had already written off. Her office still smelled like her perfume, sharp, clean, carefully chosen. Everything inside was arranged for appearance. Desk aligned, shelves styled, nothing out of place. But people who focus too much on how things look often forget to protect what matters. Her laptop sat right there. Closed. Waiting. I walked over, lowered myself into the chair, and opened it. No password. That alone told me everything I needed to know about her mindset. Confidence without caution. It didn't take long. The moment the screen lit up, I was already in. Her inbox was open. And she wasn't careful. Thread after thread, all laid out clearly. Messages between her and a private broker. Not a pawn shop. Not some quick transaction. A calculated sale. She had introduced herself as the acting decision-maker for an elderly relative. Me. She described me as declining, forgetful, in need of assistance. I read those words twice, then a third time. Not because I didn't understand them, because I wanted to be sure I wasn't imagining how deliberate they were. She hadn't just sold the jewelry. She built a story around it. A version of me that made it acceptable. Legal, even. And the amount she accepted. Far less than what those pieces were worth. But enough. Enough to fund something specific. That's when I saw it. A folder. Neatly labeled. Project Golden Years. I opened it. Inside were documents. Drafts. Forms. Everything prepared in advance. Petitions. Medical notes. Statements describing my decline. Details about my supposed inability to manage my own affairs. And at the center of it all, a plan. She wasn't just taking from me. She was preparing to take control of everything. The house. The assets. My decisions. My life. There were notes about moving me into a care facility. Discussions about selling the property afterward. Plans built on the idea that I wouldn't be able to stop her. Because, in her version of the story, I wouldn't be capable of understanding what was happening. I leaned back slowly in the chair. Not shocked. Not confused. Certain. The deeper I looked, the clearer it became. This wasn't something she came up with overnight. It had been building. Carefully. There were notes, documenting moments I barely remembered. Except now, seeing them written out, I realized something. They weren't real. At least, not the way she described them. Left the stove on. Misplaced personal items repeatedly. Demonstrated confusion during conversations. I remembered those moments. But not like that. The stove incident, she had turned it back on after I shut it off. My glasses going missing, she had moved them. Small things. Easy to dismiss on their own. But written together. They painted a picture. One that made me look unreliable. Dependent. Replaceable. Most people would have broken here. Realizing that someone they trusted wasn't just taking from them, but quietly building a case against them. Piece by piece. Moment by moment. Turning everyday life into evidence. But I didn't break. Because breaking is what she expected. I closed the laptop slowly. My reflection stared back at me from the dark screen. Steady. Clear. Unshaken. She didn't just steal my past, she was coming for my future. I didn't cry. Not after the laptop. Not after seeing what she had written about me, what she was planning. Because something changed in that moment. Up until then, I had been reacting. Feeling. Processing. But once I understood the full picture, I stopped seeing myself as the one being cornered. And started seeing the board. Every move she made. Every assumption she relied on. Every weakness she believed I had. She thought I was slow. She thought I was confused. She thought time had worn me down into someone easy to manage. She was wrong. Very wrong. Because before I was anyone's grandmother. I spent 35 years working in legal offices where mistakes cost people everything. I didn't survive that world by being emotional. I survived by being precise. Careful. And patient. I don't get mad. I get even. There are some numbers you never delete. Some people you don't lose touch with, no matter how many years pass. Harlan was one of them. He wasn't loud. He wasn't flashy. But he understood how to solve problems that most people didn't even recognize until it was too late. When he answered the phone, his voice hadn't changed. "Beatrice," he said, a hint of surprise in his tone. "Now this is a call I didn't expect." I need your help, I told him. No small talk. No explanations yet. Just truth. There was a brief pause on the other end. Then calm and direct. Tell me what happened. So I did. Every detail. The jewelry. The sale. The documents. The plan she had for me. I didn't rush it. I didn't exaggerate. I simply laid it out. By the time I finished, the silence on the line felt different. He understood. I'll be there in the morning, he said. Not maybe, not let me think about it. I'll be there. Because he knew what I knew. This wasn't a disagreement. This was a setup. That night, I reviewed everything again. Not as a victim. As someone preparing a case. The house. Still in my name. Always had been. Sila's made sure of that years ago, long before any of this became necessary. Julian and Vanessa weren't owners. They were living there under an agreement. A detailed one. One that included conditions. Conditions Vanessa had clearly violated. The jewelry. Documented. Insured. Traceable. And most importantly, sold under false claims. She didn't just take from me. She misrepresented authority she didn't have. That changed everything. Because now this wasn't just personal. It was actionable. And the moment something becomes actionable, it becomes controllable. For the next 48 hours, I said nothing. That was the hardest part. Not reacting. Not confronting. Just watching. Vanessa moved through the house like everything was settled. Like she had already secured her future. She spoke on the phone openly now. Discussing appointments. Timelines. Recovery plans. Her voice carried a kind of excitement that felt completely disconnected from what she had done. I listened. I noted everything. Dates. Locations. Names. She never once considered the possibility that I was paying attention. That's what overconfidence does. It blinds you. And she was blind. Completely. Harlan arrived early. Sharp as ever. Suit pressed, eyes alert. He stepped inside, took one look at me and nodded slightly. You're not confused, he said quietly. No, I replied, I'm not. We didn't waste time. I showed him everything. The emails. The documents. The notes she had written about me. He went through it all carefully, his expression tightening with each page. She built a narrative, he said, and she's counting on you not fighting back. That's where she miscalculated. He nodded. Good, because we're going to use that against her. We sat down together and mapped it out. Not emotionally. Strategically. Every step she took would become evidence. Every claim she made would be turned around. And every advantage she thought she had would be removed. The plan wasn't loud. It didn't involve shouting or dramatic confrontations. It was clean. Legal. Final. First, documentation. Every item in the house recorded. Every absence noted. Second, financial action. The funds she received. Trackable. Freezable. Recoverable. Third, enforcement. Once the timing was right, everything would move at once. No warning. No delay. Because giving someone time to react is how plans fail. And I wasn't going to fail. Let me ask you this. What do you do when someone underestimates you so completely, they don't even bother to hide what they're planning? Most people panic. Most people react. Most people lose control. I didn't. Because control was the only thing that mattered now. And that's when it became clear. Her schedule. Her appointment. Her complete focus on something she believed was her next step forward. And then, I realized surgery day was my perfect window. The morning of her surgery arrived quietly. No drama. No tension in the air. Just another day, if you didn't know what was about to happen. Vanessa moved through the house with a kind of excitement she didn't bother to hide. Her bags were packed the night before, carefully arranged, like she was preparing for something she believed would change her life for the better. And in a way, it would. Julian left early with her, offering to drive. I stood by the window, watching as the car pulled out of the driveway. She didn't look back. That detail stayed with me. Because people who believe they're in control rarely do. At exactly 8:52 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message from Julian. She's going in now. I read it once, then set the phone down. No hesitation. No second thoughts. Because this wasn't the moment to feel anything. This was the moment to act. By 9:00 am. My front door opened. Harlan stepped inside first. Calm, focused, exactly as I remembered. Behind him came two men in work uniforms and a woman carrying a camera and a clipboard. No confusion, no wasted movement. Each person already knew their role. Good timing, Harlan said, glancing at his watch. We're right on schedule. I nodded once. We begin now. No need for long conversations. Everything had already been discussed. The woman with the camera started immediately, documenting the house in detail. Every room, every object, every placement. Not for memory. For record. Because documentation turns truth into evidence. And evidence is what holds weight. The men moved toward the staircase, waiting for direction. Upstairs first, I said. My voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. It didn't need to. Because this wasn't chaos. This was control. Room by room, we moved. Nothing rushed. Nothing skipped. The attic came first. Every item Vanessa had pushed out of sight, furniture, boxes, pieces she called unnecessary, was photographed and cataloged. Then my bedroom. I stood at the doorway for a moment as the woman stepped forward, raising her camera toward the cedar chest. Open. Empty. She took several shots. Different angles. Close-ups. The discarded pouches. The marks along the wood where items had once rested. Proof. Clear, undeniable. Harlan stood beside me, reviewing notes as she worked. This helps establish removal, he said quietly. It establishes theft, I corrected. He gave a small nod. Yes, it does. Because there's a difference between something being missing and something being taken. And today, we were making that difference impossible to ignore. Once the documentation was complete, we moved to the next phase. Harlan stepped aside to make a call. Short, direct, focused. I didn't need to hear every word to understand what was happening. The funds Vanessa received from the sale had already been identified. Tracked. Located. And now, actioned. Accounts tied to those transactions were flagged. Remaining balances restricted. Not permanently, but enough to stop movement. Enough to prevent her from using what she took. When Harlan returned, his expression hadn't changed. It's done, he said. That was it. No explanation needed. Because in situations like this, the most powerful moves are the ones that don't need to be announced. Next came enforcement. The documents Harlan brought weren't for discussion. They were for action. Formal notices. Legal filings. Orders prepared in advance, now ready to be served. The surgical center received their copy. So did the broker who handled the sale. Everything connected to Vanessa's actions was now part of a process she could no longer control. Because once something enters that system, it moves forward whether you're ready or not. And she wasn't ready. Not even close. She was still lying on a table somewhere, believing she was stepping into a better version of her life. She had no idea that everything tied to that decision was already shifting beneath her. Then came the part most people would hesitate with. Her belongings. Closets. Drawers. Personal items. Everything that tied her to this house. The men worked efficiently, packing each item into labeled containers. Clothes. Shoes. Accessories. Even the things she valued most, carefully placed away like they no longer belonged here. Because they didn't. I watched from the hallway. Not out of emotion. Out of certainty. This wasn't punishment. This was correction. She made a choice. And this was the result of that choice. Nothing more. Nothing less. This is where most people would hesitate. They would stop. Second guess. Worry about how it looks. But hesitation creates gaps. And gaps give people time to recover. I didn't leave gaps. By early afternoon, the house had changed. Not physically, but legally. Everything was documented. Everything was recorded. Everything was set in motion. Vanessa's access, to money, to property, to control, had been removed piece by piece. Not loudly. Not publicly. But effectively. Harlan gathered his papers, giving me one last look. "She won't see this coming," he said. "No," I replied, "she won't." Because she never expected resistance. She expected compliance. And that's where she made her final mistake. I walked back into my bedroom and looked at the empty chest one more time. It didn't feel hollow anymore. Not like it did before. Because now, it wasn't the only thing that had been emptied. By the time she woke up, her life was already gone. Julian came home just after 5. The sun was still out, casting long streaks of light across the driveway. From the window, I watched his car slow down, then stop. He didn't get out immediately. That told me everything. He had already seen it. The absence. The chain. The quiet that didn't feel normal. After a few seconds, the car door opened. He stepped out, looking around as if the house itself had shifted while he was gone. The moving truck had already left. The police cruiser was gone. But the difference lingered. He walked up the steps quickly, keys in hand, his expression tight with confusion. The front door opened. "Mom," he called out. His voice carried uncertainty and something else. Concern. I was sitting in the living room, exactly where he expected me to be. Calm. Waiting. He stepped inside, eyes moving quickly across the room. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked. "Where?" "Vanessa's stuff." Straight to it. No small talk. No distractions. I set my teacup down gently before answering. "Packed," I said. He blinked. "Packed," he repeated. "What do you mean packed?" "It's no longer here." His confusion shifted into something sharper. "Why?" he asked, his voice rising slightly. "Why would you do that?" I held his gaze. "Because she stole from me." Silence. Not disbelief. Not denial. Just silence. That was enough. Because silence doesn't come from confusion. It comes from recognition. Julian ran a hand through his hair, packing once across the room before turning back to me. "Mom, she said you were upset about some jewelry," he began carefully. "She said you might have misunderstood." "I didn't misunderstand," I cut in. My voice wasn't loud. But it was final. "She sold it, Julian, every piece." He looked down for a moment. That was all I needed to see. "You knew," I said. It wasn't a question. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he exhaled slowly, like someone trying to hold together something already slipping. "She told me it would help," he said quietly. "That things were getting tight, that it was just sitting there." "Just sitting there," I repeated. He winced slightly at the echo of his own words. You let her do it, I said. Julian looked up quickly. I didn't let her, he replied, his voice tightening. I didn't stop her. There it was. The truth, without defense. She said it would take pressure off everything, he continued. She said it was temporary, that she'd replace it later. Replace it, I asked. Yes. With what? I pressed. More money, more excuses. He didn't answer. Because he couldn't. Some things don't survive being said out loud. You chose her comfort over my life, I said. That's not fair, he shot back. No, I replied calmly. Then explain it in a way that makes sense. He opened his mouth. Then closed it. Because there wasn't one. Let me ask you something. Would you choose your wife or your mother? Would you stand there, knowing one of them was wrong, and still say nothing? Because silence is a choice. And every choice has a cost. Julian sank onto the couch, his hands pressing into his face. I didn't think it would go this far, he said, his voice muffled. I thought she just needed support, that she was under pressure. And what about me? I asked. He looked up. For the first time since he walked in, he looked at me. Not past me. Not around me. At me. I didn't see it, he admitted. Yes, you did, I said softly. You just didn't want to deal with it. That landed. Hard. Because denial isn't the absence of truth. It's the refusal to act on it. She's been planning more than this, Julian, I continued. The jewelry was just the beginning. His expression changed. Confusion again. But deeper this time. What do you mean? He asked. I reached beside me and picked up the folder Harlan had prepared. Slowly, I handed it to him. Read, I said. He hesitated for a second, then opened it. Page by page, his expression shifted. Confusion. Disbelief. Then something heavier. Realization. She was trying to. He started, unable to finish. To take control, I completed. Legally, permanently. His hands tightened around the papers. She told me you were getting forgetful, he said, his voice shaking slightly. That she was just preparing in case. In case I became inconvenient, I asked. He didn't answer. Because now he understood. Fully. I didn't know, he said finally. You didn't ask, I replied. That difference mattered. A lot. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling like he was trying to process everything at once. She lied to me, he said. Yes, I agreed. And I believed her. Yes. That part was harder for him. Because betrayal hurts. But realizing you helped it happen. That cuts deeper. What do I do now? He asked quietly. For the first time, he wasn't defending her. He was asking for direction. Before I could answer, his phone rang. He looked down at the screen. The name flashing across it said everything. Vanessa. Calling from the recovery center. His phone rang, and everything changed. Julian stared at his phone like it had just betrayed him. Vanessa's name kept flashing. Ringing. Again. And again. He finally answered. Hello. Her voice came through sharp, strained, and nothing like the calm confidence she carried at home. Julian, what's going on? She demanded. My card isn't working. They're telling me there's an issue with payment. I need you to fix this now. No greeting. No warmth. Just urgency. Julian didn't respond immediately. Because now he knew. Vanessa, he said slowly, what did you do? There was a pause on the other end. A small one. But it said everything. What are you talking about? She snapped. This isn't the time for questions, just handle it. Julian looked at me. For guidance. For answers. For something. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Because this was his moment. His choice. And he knew it. Vanessa, Julian said, his voice tightening. We need to talk. No, we don't, she replied quickly. I need you to fix this. I'm still here, I just got out and they're saying. They froze the accounts, he interrupted. Silence. Then, what do you mean they froze the accounts? They traced the money, he said. Everything you did, it's being handled. Her tone changed instantly. What are you saying? She asked, slower now. Handled how? Julian swallowed. Legally. Another pause. Longer this time. You told her, Vanessa said quietly. Julian didn't answer. Because he didn't have to. You weren't supposed to do that, she continued, her voice tightening. You said you understood, you said you trusted me. I trusted you to do the right thing, he replied. And I did, she snapped. I was protecting us. No, he said firmly. You were protecting yourself. That landed. Hard. We didn't wait long. Julian grabbed his keys. I stood, steady as ever. And together we left. The drive was quiet. Heavy. Not with uncertainty, but with clarity. By the time we arrived, everything had already started moving. The hospital lobby was calm, indifferent to what was unfolding inside one of its rooms. We made our way up without speaking. Room number 312. Julian paused at the door. Not out of fear. Out of understanding. Once he stepped inside, nothing would be the same. He opened it. Vanessa was sitting upright in the bed, her face still marked from the procedure. Bandages. Swelling. Carefully placed adjustments that were meant to make her feel better about herself. But none of that mattered now. Because the moment she saw us, her expression changed. Confusion first. Then irritation. Then something closer to concern. What took you so long? She snapped. I've been calling. She stopped mid-sentence. Because she saw my face. Not angry. Not emotional. Certain. What is she doing here? Vanessa asked, her voice tightening. Julian stepped forward. She knows everything. Vanessa froze. Just for a second. But it was enough. What are you talking about? Vanessa said quickly, trying to recover. Julian, you're not making sense. The jewelry, he said. The sale, the documents. Her eyes flickered. That was the crack. I was helping us, she insisted. We needed that money. You built a case against her, Julian cut in. You were going to take everything. That's not true, she snapped. That was just a backup plan. A backup plan, I repeated calmly. She turned toward me, her expression tightening. You wouldn't understand, she said. No, I replied. I understand perfectly. I took a step forward. You didn't just take what belonged to me, I continued. You tried to rewrite who I am. Her jaw tightened. That's not what this is about, she said. It is now, I replied. If you're still watching, you already know how this ends. Because some actions don't come back from explanation. Some choices don't get softened with excuses. They reach a point where the truth stands on its own. And this was that point. There was a knock at the door. Sharp. Precise. Julian turned. 2 officers stepped inside, followed by a man in a suit carrying a folder. Vanessa's expression shifted instantly. What is this? She asked, her voice rising. The man stepped forward calmly. Vanessa Clark, he said. You are being served with notice regarding financial misrepresentation and unlawful asset liquidation. Her face drained. This is ridiculous, she snapped. There has to be some mistake. There is no mistake, I said. She looked at me, anger flashing through the fear. You did this, she said. Yes, I replied. Because I didn't need to hide it. Vanessa turned to Julian, her voice shifting again, softer now, desperate. Julian, say something, she pleaded. You know I didn't mean for it to go this far. You know I was trying to help us. Julian didn't move, didn't speak, didn't step closer. He just looked at her. And in that look, everything changed. I trusted you, he. The house felt different after everything settled. Not empty. Not broken. Just honest. No more careful pretending. No more hidden intentions moving quietly through the rooms. Just space that finally belonged to truth again. Julian sat across from me that evening, his elbows resting on his knees, head slightly lowered. He hadn't spoken much since the hospital. People often think the hardest part is confrontation. It is. It's what comes after. When the noise is gone, and you're left with everything you avoided saying out loud. I didn't see it, he said again quietly. This time, I didn't interrupt him. Because this part wasn't about correcting him. It was about letting him understand. You saw it, I replied. You just didn't accept it. He nodded slowly. That hurt him more than disagreement would have. Because denial always feels safer than truth, until it doesn't. Over the next few days, Julian changed. Not dramatically. Not suddenly. But noticeably. He started asking questions instead of assuming answers. He stopped defending what he didn't understand. And for the first time in a long time, he listened more than he spoke. One evening, he came into my room holding a document. I've been speaking to Harlan, he said. I looked up. And we're making sure everything is corrected, he replied. Everything she tried to put in motion, it's being reversed. I nodded. Not surprised. Just relieved. Because correction only works when someone finally decides to stop pretending. I should have protected you, he said after a pause. You can't protect what you don't see clearly, I replied. He looked at me then. Properly. Not as a son trying to fix a mistake, but as someone, finally, understanding the weight of responsibility. That mattered more than apologies. The legal process moved quickly after that. Ownership clarified. Financial control restored. Every false claim dismantled piece by piece until nothing remained of the structure Vanessa had tried to build. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like restoration. Like something long displaced, finally finding its place again. I returned to my room one morning and opened the cedar chest. Still empty, but no longer heavy. Because the meaning hadn't been taken. Only the objects had. And meaning isn't something you can sell. Julian stood in the doorway as I placed my hand on the wood. Do you want to replace them? He asked softly. I shook my head. No, I said. What belonged there already exists. He didn't ask what I meant. He understood. People think treasure is about value. Gold, stones, numbers on paper. But that was never true. Treasure is memory. It's time that cannot be repeated. It's a moment you survived that no one else can live for you. That chest wasn't filled with wealth. It was filled with proof that life had meaning even in its hardest years. Silas understood that better than anyone. He never gave me things to impress. He gave me things to remember. And now I understood something he had known all along. Nothing real can be taken without your permission to let it define you. Vanessa took objects, but she never touched what they represented. That part stayed untouched. Because some things don't leave with hands. They only leave when you stop remembering who you are. Tell me, was I too harsh? Because people will always have opinions when consequences finally arrive. Some will say I should have been softer. Others will say I waited too long. But very few will understand what it feels like to have your life reduced to something someone else believes they can manage for you. Stories like this don't start with strangers. They start with people you trust. If you're not subscribed, you're choosing to stay blind to it. Subscribe now so you don't become the next story we tell. And if you still won't, be honest, what's really stopping you? Because silence doesn't protect you. Awareness does. Because some things are worth more than gold,